in the last 10 years or so. We know that. But I think we as a country have matured now, yeah, if you look at it. So certainly an international investor, they're very savvy. You know, they will actually decide and price the risk appropriately. Said, okay, I'm going to invest in a sovereign bond. Should I do it in a third world country like Kenya, Ghana, or should I put it?
Don't call us a third world country. I think that term was banned. And so it's developing country. You have to now say lower income.
I apologize. I think I'm doing a disservice.
Thank you very much, Rajesh.
Yeah, we are. In fact, we are a middle.
Yes, lower middle income. We are above $1,000 in GDP per capita.
We are promoted, yeah.
So if you're not feeling richer as a Kenyan, but you should, because we are lower income.
That risk pricing is there if you think of it. Like, I mean, if you look at Eurobond right now, I can't remember, but it must be 8-9% right now.
Yes.
Yeah. Where you look at our sovereign bond in Europe and everything, you know, they're going around 1-2%. If you look at US,
give me a comparison, Rajesh, of a more peer country as opposed to US.
All I'm saying is those risks are already factored by an investor.
Within that 9%, that's what you're saying.
Yeah. And let me because if you look at a dollar deposit in a bank in Europe and anything, you hardly earn any money.
Even here.
Yeah. Yet we are borrowing as a country at what, 7-8% in dollars.
So that factor is
so people will factor it. So even when the government is going out and trying to price its bond, it will also look at those factors, saying what is the risk premium I'm willing to give for people to invest in my bond.
I just wanted to say that what we are facing as a country is not anything new. I think the environment has not really significantly changed from the time even when the Eurobond was being subscribed. And you remember from the statistics, there was actually an oversubscription. So I don't think talking about the international market, I don't expect people to feel that there's a significant risk that they need to pull out.
All right, what you can see on your screen right now is Justin Muturi, the Speaker of the House, who is calling the House to order, preparing to listen in to the Treasury Secretary, Henry Rotich. So we'll proceed to cross over to the National Assembly to listen to the Speaker and subsequently to Henry Rotich, the Cabinet Secretary, to bring us our 2016 budget.
Mr. Speaker, once again, it's my singular honor to present the fourth budget statement under the administration of His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta. This statement is being presented at a time when our economy is growing at a decent pace compared with other countries in the region and globally. In short, Mr. Speaker, our economy is performing quite well, and policy measures I intend to highlight this afternoon are intended to consolidate this momentum and lead to increased prosperity for all Kenyans. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, the theme of this budget is consolidating gains for a prosperous Kenya. Mr. Speaker, this optimism is not misplaced. It's indeed based on our well-demonstrated capacity for resilience and strong and prudent management of our economic affairs, even in the face of difficult global environment. I will, Mr. Speaker, in a short while demonstrate the recent economic successes that we have made as a nation under very difficult circumstances. But before I do that, Mr. Speaker, allow me at the outset to thank you for allowing us to read the budget statement on a Wednesday, a break from the past when we read it on Thursdays. This is because our sisters and brothers in Uganda are celebrating the National Heroes Day tomorrow, Thursday, and therefore, in keeping with our tradition of presenting budget statements simultaneously in East African community, this day was agreed upon by all East African countries' partners. Mr. Speaker, our economy is growing at a stronger pace than others because under the strong leadership of our President, we are confronting head-on the challenges we face with determination and confidence. Kenyans want their children to go to quality schools and to get jobs. They want to live healthy lives. They want decent transport, affordable food and decent shelter. And above all, they want to see progress in all aspects of our economy. Achieving all this requires bold leadership, and all Kenyans work hard. All Kenyans working hard and playing their part to deliver a common vision for our country. In sum, we need to remain steadfast in pursuing our long-term development agenda and focus less on short-term fixes of issues. Mr. Speaker, I believe wholeheartedly that Kenyans are up to the task, but it requires concerted efforts from all of us to aim high and remain focused on what needs to be done. With our vibrant democracy and great leadership from the President, I can confirm that the future of our nation is indeed bright. Mr. Speaker, our plan for economic transformation, which started in 2013, is working and delivering results. We just need to remain steadfast and continue to improve the business environment in order to lower the cost of doing business, improve competitiveness, and attract more investment for growth, employment generation, and poverty reduction. We also need to continue with safeguarding macroeconomic stability, invest in security, improve infrastructure, and take various measures to drive agriculture and industrial transformation so as to ensure food security and lower food prices, increase quality and diversification of exports, accelerate inclusive growth, create jobs, and reduce poverty. We also need to prioritize investment in quality and accessible healthcare services, as well as quality and relevant education. We also need to ensure adequate support for the most vulnerable in our societies. And also we need to support devolution through funding and working closely with the county governments to build appropriate public financial management capacity to help them to better deliver services to wananchi and implement economic, financial, and other reforms to boost our productivity and competitiveness. In a nutshell, Mr. Speaker, this budget aims to consolidate the significant gains already made in these priority areas that I've just mentioned, and we will do this within a sustainable fiscal framework. Mr. Speaker, working together under this plan, we shall achieve higher and sustainable growth, provide jobs to our youth, reduce poverty and inequality as a nation, and position ourselves as an upper income.
Deep gratitude for
this is the Kenya we want. Mr. Speaker, this House approved the 2016 budget policy statement and the division of revenue bill that was submitted to Parliament in February this year. This paved the way for the preparation of the budget estimates for financial year 2016-2017 that was submitted to the National Assembly on 28 April 2016. The estimates broadly reflect the priorities that I have just elaborated. In addition, I'm now submitting the Finance Bill 2016, which contains the taxation and financial proposal that will further help achieve our goals. Mr. Speaker, we are now in the final stages of engagement with the Budget and Appropriation Committee on the review process and prepare the ground for the appropriation bill. It's my expectation that the final budget, which should be approved before the end of this month, will reinforce the basis of achieving our long-term development goals and help us move steadily towards meeting the 2030 development agenda for sustainable development goals, commonly known as SDGs. Mr. Speaker, while finalizing this statement, I ask Kenyans to give me their views on how we are faring on our taxation, social service delivery, and how best to accelerate inclusive economic growth. Allow me, Mr. Speaker, to sample just a few of the responses from well-wishing Kenyans who want to make positive contribution to our development agenda. Mr. Speaker, I have received a very clear message that everybody must pay taxes, including the informal sector. For example, Mr. Kevin Omweri has written to me, and I quote, "An economy like ours cannot be supported by 2 million taxpayers in the formal economy. There are persons in the informal economy in this country who make millions that do not get taxed because they are the informal economy and professional tax evaders. Yet we all want NHIF to expand and cover the majority, and we also want better education, healthcare facilities, and infrastructure. So we all must participate in some way in paying taxes, and those in the informal economy must also pay tax on income and not just VAT. Mr. Speaker, I fully agree with Mr. Umweri. We must widen the tax net so that every eligible taxpayer, including the informal sector, pays tax. In this respect, I've asked the Kenya Revenue Authority to explore ways of taxing the informal sector and to redouble their efforts in netting tax evaders. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, if everybody pays their fair share of taxes, we would be in a better position to lower tax rates. As part of the review of the income tax, we are considering to introduce presumptive tax for the hard-to-tax segment of our people, including those in the informal sector. Mr. Speaker, on social service delivery, one Kenyan in the diaspora by the name Wanjiku told us, and I quote, "You need to invest more in education, because through this you will instill national pride, and in 20 years or less will pay their taxes. Public servants will serve with integrity, and the systems will take care of the less fortunate." Mr. Speaker, we share the same conviction with this Wanjiku, and it is for this reason that we are heavily investing in education through the free primary education, the free day secondary, the digital literacy program popularly known as the laptop, as well as expanding our technical training institutes and our universities. Of course, Mr. Speaker, we are well aware that in addition to investing in education, investing in health is equally important, and working with counties, we have prioritized this sector in funding, including introducing medical equipment leasing initiative. Mr. Speaker, on accelerating economic growth, Mr. Gilbert Kieng from Elgeyo Marakwet wrote to me and said, government should focus on improving and creating new factories to process agricultural products. He wonders why mangoes are left rotting in farms like in Kerio Valley and potatoes getting wasted during periods of high yields. The government should create a factory to process and export dried mangoes and chips. It's a multi-billion business in Philippines. If we can improve processing of agricultural products, we can create more jobs and expand our economy by more than 10% annually. Mr. Speaker, this proposal is in line with our plan to transform the agricultural sector, improve productivity, efficiency, and coordination throughout the entire value chain. Of course, Mr. Speaker, our main role is to facilitate private sector to join us with the government in creating value addition for agricultural produce in the country for both domestic and export market. That's why we are investing in smallholder irrigation and ensuring affordable credit to farmers. Finally, Mr. Speaker, Kenyans are very loud and clear that we should eliminate corruption and wastage. I will say more later on this statement on what we are doing in this area. Mr. Speaker, I was delighted by the overwhelming constructive responses by Kenyans who have so far sent me over 285 suggestions, and I would like to assure them that we will take these suggestions into account as we strive to implement our economic transformation agenda. Mr. Speaker, let me just now turn to the highlights of the 2016-2017 budget. Mr. Speaker, the budget is guided by the government strategic intervention aimed at transforming our economy into a fully fledged middle-income country sooner than later. It is a budget that will reinforce the foundation that we set 3 years ago for a strong shared growth and for sustained reduction in unemployment and poverty. Mr. Speaker, in brief, we propose improving our revenue collection, including appropriation in aid, to 1.5 trillion Kenya shillings, or 20.3% of GDP, up from the estimated 1.3 trillion Kenya shillings, or 19.7% of GDP in 2015-2016. Mr. Speaker, we plan to enhance our efforts to broaden the tax base and improve revenue administration by the Kenya Revenue Authority. Already, we have adopted a simple and modern VAT legislation, while appeals have been consolidated in one legislation. Mr. Speaker, I thank this House for approving a modern and simplified Excise Duty Act and Tax Procedure Act, both of which are now being implemented. Already, these legislations are beginning to yield more revenue for the government, judging from the performance in the recent 4 months. Mr. Speaker, we will be proposing additional tax measures in the following areas. 1, promoting growth of industries and employment creation. 2, facilitating infrastructure development. 3, enhancing equity and fairness in the tax system and tax administration. 4, cushioning household budget to ease the cost of living. 5, strengthening financial sector stability and promoting private sector growth. Mr. Speaker, the government will continue to rationalize and prioritize expenditure for maximum impact with limited resources. We will also enhance efficiency and ensure value for money. In financial year 2016-2017, overall expenditure and net lending are projected at 2.3 trillion Kenya shillings, or 30.6% of GDP, up from the estimated 1.8 trillion Kenya shillings in 2015-2016. The expenditures in the financial year 2016-2017 includes externally funded development projects amounting to 413.6 billion, or 5.6% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, our expenditures are aimed at supporting growth while helping to crowd in private sector to take up new opportunities. I will provide details of our expenditure plan shortly. Meanwhile, it's important to acknowledge the support from our development partners who have worked closely with us to align their funding with our national development agenda. I wish to salute all of them for their generous gesture, which is a clear vote of confidence in our transformative economic agenda. So, Speaker, now let me turn to the recent economic developments, and I'll start with the global environment. Mr. Speaker, we have prepared the budget of 2016-2017 against a backdrop of slower global growth and increased uncertainty. The pace of economic growth has slowed in many countries. The impact of lower commodity prices on commodity importers is less positive than expected, and commodity exporters have to adjust their economies in a more difficult environment. World growth, therefore, slowed to 3.4% in 2014 to 3.1% in 2015, and is estimated at 3.2% this year. Growth in sub-Saharan Africa weakened from 5.1% in 2014 to 3.4% in 2015, and is projected to decline further to 3% in 2016. The slowdown primarily reflects the decline in commodity prices as well as lower demand from China, the largest single trading partner of sub-Saharan African countries. In addition, the region's frontier markets are adversely affected by tight global financing conditions. Sub-Saharan Africa regional growth is projected to peak to 4% in 2017, driven by sustained infrastructure investment, buoyant service sector, strong agricultural production, rebound in commodity prices, and timely policy implementation. On domestic scene, Mr. Speaker, our economy remains resilient and registered relatively strong growth amid the global economic slowdown, thanks to the ongoing infrastructure investment, increased investor and consumer confidence, and improved agricultural production. Today, Mr. Speaker, Kenya's growth is relatively much stronger compared to the peers in sub-Saharan Africa. According to Bloomberg, Mr. Speaker, Kenya's economy is among the top fastest growing in the world. We are ranked as one of the 7 best countries for investment, the second biggest market for retail investors in Africa. These accolades are not coming from the government, but from external objective observers of our country. And this, Mr. Speaker, should make us proud of our achievements. Both the IMF and the World Bank have lauded our growth of 5.6% in 2015, which was well above the sub-Saharan African average of 3.5%. Our economy generated 841,600 new jobs, up from 799,000 in 2014, according to the latest economic survey released by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. Of course, Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding these achievements, a lot remains to be done in order to decisively deal with the challenges of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. Mr. Speaker, our target to generate 1 million new jobs remains. In 2016, we target to grow by 6% and by 7% in the medium term. This level of growth will continue generating new jobs and creating new opportunities for our young men and women graduating from various institutions. The faster we grow above this level on sustainable basis, the more chances we have of putting a dent on poverty, because many more of our youth who are entering the labor market will be easily absorbed. Mr. Speaker, Kenya has established a strong track record of macroeconomic stability, and this budget underscores our commitment to sustain this effort going forward. In this regard, we shall continue to implement prudent financial and monetary policies in the context of weakened global economy, lower commodity prices, and pressure in our exchange rate as the United States continue to tighten monetary policy by raising interest rates. As a result of prudent fiscal and monetary policies, inflationary pressures were contained to 5% in May 2016. And there has been a steady decline in short-term interest, with a 91-day Treasury bill rate at 7.5% in early June. We will continue to maintain low and stable interest rates going forward. Mr. Speaker, the current account deficit has narrowed due to lower oil import bill, improved earnings from tea and horticulture exports, and strong diaspora remittance. The deficit was estimated at 6.8% of GDP in 2015, a reduction of 3% point from 2014, and is expected to narrow further in 2016. The exchange rate to the US dollar has remained stable, exchanging at about 100 shillings per dollar. Our foreign exchange reserves is at $7.6 billion, equivalent to 5% of months of import cover. This should serve as a buffer to any potential external shocks. But Mr. Speaker, because we are living in a vulnerable world, we need further cushion to protect our economy against shocks, and as we implement our economic programs. For this reason, the International Monetary Fund approved in March this year a 2-year precautionary program for Kenya, totaling $1.5 billion. This support is a clear indication from the international community that we are doing the right things and that they have confidence in the way we are managing our economy. These resources, together with the strong foreign exchange reserves, are readily available in the event that Kenya faces severe internal or external shocks. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, we are well positioned to continue implementing our transformative economic agenda without any major risk of exogenous shocks, because we are adequately insured. Mr. Speaker, now let me turn to the sectoral policies and expenditures. Mr. Speaker, the rest of my statement will cover the progress made in various strategic areas in our development plan and expenditure allocation. Then the fiscal projections for 2016 and 2017, and finally conclude with the tax and other policy measures contained in the finance bill that I have submitted today. Mr. Speaker, let me start with the modernizing security. Mr. Speaker, we are part of the global community and are susceptible to various security challenges, including terrorism and the radicalization of a few of our young men and women. We have done a lot in the area of security as a country, and more will be done. Mr. Speaker, the people of Nairobi and Coast may have by now noticed the surveillance cameras installed in strategic points and roads in Nairobi and Mombasa. This security surveillance system provides real-time footage to the National Police Operations Center, enabling security agents to monitor and detect crime. We have also invested heavily in street lighting in major cities and towns. Mr. Speaker, we are beginning to reap significant dividends from our investment in this sector. A testimony of this development is a comment by Mr. Gishana, from Nairobi who said that there would be no more sending of officers blindly to the scenes of incidents, as specific locations will be identified using GPS, thus making work easier. Mr. Speaker, in addition to surveillance cameras, we have also established the Command and Control Center, expanded police training facilities, acquired police vehicles and motorbikes to enhance mobility across the country. We have also enhanced connection of integrated population registration system, IPRS, to agencies and launched the e-passport. We have improved police welfare, continued construction of housing units, and recruitment of more police officers, hence improving on police population ratio, among others. Mr. Speaker, we are also prioritizing the provision of decent housing for our disciplined forces. To this end, I am pleased to report that we have already signed a bilateral framework agreement between the government of Kenya and Shelter Afrique, and are negotiating a financing agreement with the African Development Bank and other partners that in the first phase will see development of 20,000 units of police housing within 24 months. Construction will commence in October this year. Once phase 1 is underway, we expect to concurrently launch additional phases with a view to conclusively addressing the housing gap for police and other disciplined forces, which is estimated at over 100,000 units currently. Mr. Speaker, we have achieved much towards reducing incidents of insecurity in the country, and we will not be complacent. Our security modernization program will continue to fully assure both domestic and foreign investors and Kenyans in general of safety and security of their lives and investment. In addition, we will enhance security operations, especially in areas prone to crime, build capacity for effective and faster investigation, and build coordination among security agencies with strong partnership with communities. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, I have allocated 124 billion to Defense and National Intelligence Service, NIS, and 140 billion to the State Department of Interior and Coordination of National Government. This significant increase in allocation will go towards military and police modernization, leasing, financing of police motor vehicles, enhanced security operations, police and prison officers medical insurance scheme, construction and equipping of the National Forensic Laboratory, construction of police stations and housing, and to secure our borders, among others. Mr. Speaker, the government is fully cognizant of the adverse effects that corruption poses to our economy, including inefficiency, low productivity, and high cost of doing business. Mr. Speaker, we shall continue strengthening the various institutions that are mandated to fight corruption in the country, particularly the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, the Department of Public Prosecution, and the police. This will enhance their capacity to vigorously combat corruption and the recovery of corruptly acquired assets. Already, Mr. Speaker, we have seen the dividends of the coordinated investigation among these agencies. Under the multi-agency team, MAT, that brings together the Kenya Police Services, Directorate of Criminal Investigations, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, the Financial Reporting Center, the Directorate of Public Prosecution, and the Kenya Revenue Authority, and the Asset Recovery Agency, more than 360 corrupt cases are now before the courts. The ball now is in the judiciary's court to expeditiously adjudicate these cases. Mr. Speaker, on asset recovery, the multi-agency team has stressed and is in the process of preparing to seize property and assets acquired using proceeds of corruption. We are also working with the United Kingdom's government to repatriate about 52 million Kenya shillings as proceeds of corruption from the Smith and Usman case. These monies will be used to procure 11 ambulances for various hospitals. We are also expecting another 525 million Kenya shillings from the Jersey Islands government, being proceeds from the entity that was used to transfer illicit money from one of our parastatals, KPLC, and are in the process of identifying projects that will be financed by these proceeds. Mr. Speaker, to strengthen the work of the anti-graft multi-agency team, we have allocated 2.8 billion to Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, 2.1 billion to the Department of Public Prosecution, and 300 million to the Financial Reporting Center. Mr. Speaker, we are improving our public financial management to preempt rent-seeking opportunities and eliminate wastage. In particular, we have continued to build up capacity among institutions implementing public financial management reforms and have rolled out the e-procurement modules under the IFMIS. Further, Mr. Speaker, I gazetted regulations for the Public Financial Management Act 2012 in 2015 for both the national and the county government. These regulations seek to set a standardized financial management system to ensure accountability, transparency, effective and economic and efficient collection and utilization of public resources. Mr. Speaker, we now require all accounting officers to strictly adhere to these regulations. And as a way to dismantle entrenched interest in expenditure executing agencies, we have redeployed all public finance officers. These are accountants, finance officers, internal auditors, and procurement officers to serve in new stations for a maximum of 3 years. Those who will handle procurement will have to undergo vetting. Mr. Speaker, the government will continue to resource and strengthen the capacity of institutions that provide oversight to PFM, including the National Treasury, Office of the Controller of Budgets, Office of the Auditor General, and the Public Procurement Regulatory Authority. We now have in place a new procurement law and public audit law. All public institutions are hereby required to familiarize themselves with these laws and strictly adhere to the requirements therein. Mr. Speaker, during the financial year 2015-2016, we tightened the release of exchequer to ministries and departments so as to ensure efficient use of public resources and reduce wastage. This policy will continue in the financial year 2016-2017, and this will be complemented by full adoption of the Treasury single account by September 2016, which will ensure efficient and effective cash management. Mr. Speaker, to further strengthen governance, we have issued a notice directing all public entities, that is the national governments, ministries, departments and agencies, the national government, state corporations and semi-autonomous government agencies, and all the 47 county governments to establish internal audit committees with effect from 1st July 2016. The audit committees will be responsible for advising the accounting officers regarding suitability and robustness of the institution's internal control systems and procedures. Mr. Speaker, members of the committees shall be sourced competitively, and I encourage qualified Kenyans to meet the requirement to apply for these positions when the respective public entities that currently do not comply advertise. On state-owned enterprises, Mr. Speaker, to further improve effective use of our scarce resources, the government is committed to implement parastatal reforms. In this regard, the government-owned entities bill is currently before Cabinet and it's on its way to Parliament. Mr. Speaker, regarding strategic government investments that have faced challenges recently, allow me to report as follows. We are working to ensure that Kenya Airways turns around its financial position and is able to play its role in our economy, especially as a key asset supporting our tourism and transport sector. On telecom, I am happy to report that significant progress has been made in which Orange Kenya will sell its shares to strategic investor. Through this transaction, Mr. Speaker, the government of Kenya will increase its shareholding from the current 30% to 40%. We expect the new investor to turn around the fortunes of the company so that it can be sustained, it will be a sustainable business capable of competing effectively in the telecommunication sector. Finally, the government recognizes the importance of financially strong Mumias Sugar Company to the economy of Western Kenya. Consequently, the government allocated 2 billion in this financial year in order to support the revival of the company, and we believe we have now laid a strong foundation for its recovery. On the use of enhanced efficiency in ICT, Mr. Speaker, access to information communication and technology, ICT, is critical for the country's productivity and competitiveness in a knowledge-based economy. The government is therefore committed to investing resources as well as providing a conducive environment for the ICT sector to thrive. This will not only improve service delivery, but cut transaction costs and safeguard government revenue. Much progress has been made, including digital land transaction services, e-registry, business registration, motor vehicles and driver's license services, and services under the registration of persons, including passports, work permits, and visa application. Mr. Speaker, I stated in my last budget statement, we are moving all payments to government onto the digital platform. The objective of the government digital program is to ensure that all payments to government are made electronically so as to significantly reduce administrative costs, minimize leakage, and expand access to payment points. This has enabled Kenyans to pay for government services wherever they are and using payment channels of their choice, thus saving them costs associated with transport and queuing time. To date, Mr. Speaker, over 1.7 million Kenyans have registered on e-citizen payment platform, where they are able to access 115 services from different government agencies, including some from the county governments. To date, the platform has processed over 2.4 million applications and collected 4.2 billion shillings in government revenue. Some of the additional services we shall be bringing on board include assessment and payment of stamp duty, application for identity cards, and inspection of company files. Mr. Speaker, to assure ourselves that the system is robust and not subject to manipulation, we have instituted an audit whose finding will be used to review the payment architecture. We will work closely with the ICT Ministry on this. Mr. Speaker, the government has made strides in enhancing access to and delivery of government services to all Kenyans through the one-stop shop service centers, popularly known as Huduma centers. By January 2016, we had 40 Huduma centers across the country, and the target is that each of the 47 counties in the country will have an Huduma center by the end of the financial year 2016-2017. This one-stop shop service delivery program provides channels for different integrated government services to the public, including the fiscal centers, online portal, mobile phone services to citizens, and a unified and integrated payment gateway, known as Huduma Card, to facilitate payment for government services. All these developments and innovation, Mr. Speaker, go a long way in reducing transaction costs to the Mwananchi, in addition to improving government revenue collection by sealing loopholes. Mr. Speaker, implementation of the Kenya National Electronic Single Window System is on course, and 17 modules are now operational, while the remaining 3 will be completed in the next 6 months. We are beginning to see the benefit of this investment, with the time taken to process documentation declining by 50%, while the number of times a client needs to visit a government agency coming down to 0. At the same time, there is increased uptake by government agencies processing their permits through the system. This has therefore contributed to enhance efficiency, transparency, accountability, governance, and competitiveness, while at the same time improving revenue collection. Mr. Speaker, the government has put in place initiatives such as the Presidential Digital Talent Initiative, Digital Literacy Program, Kenya Transparency and Communication Infrastructure Program, County Connectivity Program, Enterprise Kenya, Digital Migration, and NOFRI Phase 2 that will improve the delivery of government services. In addition, Mr. Speaker, Kenya identified Konsa Techno City as one of the national flagship projects to position Kenya as a sustainable world-class ICT hub in the region. In this subsector, I am proposing to allocate a total of 6.1 billion for single window support project, research development fund, rollout of IFMIS, development at Konsa Technopolis, digital migration, and for the Presidential Digital Talent Program. Mr. Speaker, let me now turn to the business regulatory reform and private sector development. As highlighted during last year's budget statement, the government is committed to reducing the cost of doing business and encouraging private sector innovation, entrepreneurship, and business expansion in order to have a strong and sustainable high economic growth and reduction in the poverty level. An interagency business environment delivery unit has been constituted and tasked with the mandate of coordinating the business processes, the engineering of 6 out of 10 World Bank doing business indicators. These reforms that we are undertaking, Mr. Speaker, are expected to further improve our business environment and our overall ranking in the World Bank Ease of Doing Business report, which improved significantly from position 129 in 2015 to position 108 out of the 189 economies. Mr. Speaker, building on the progress achieved thus far, the government has further made it easier to register a company through the overhaul of the Companies Act. We have cut to a minimum the old stringent rules that once made it difficult for sole business owners to register as limited liability companies. The government will continue to simplify and modernize business regulatory regimes, rationalize regulatory fees and other charges, and eliminate regulatory and other hurdles that discourage investment. Further, we shall establish an institutional and legal framework for the management of regulatory charges, including those imposed by county governments. Mr. Speaker, allow me to thank the members of Parliament for taking time to review and pass the necessary pieces of legislation to enable many of these reforms to be implemented. I would also want to ask for your support to prioritize debate and the passage of other pieces of legislation which are aimed at strengthening the business environment. Mr. Speaker, let me now turn to the financial sector stability and development. Mr. Speaker, Kenya's financial sector development continues to support economic growth through mobilization of large savings to finance investment needs. In 2015-2016 World Economic Forum Global Competitiveness Report, Kenya ranked number 42 in the world out of 140 countries for financial market development. In 2015, our capital markets industry was voted the most innovative in Africa by Africa Investor, thus placing our capital markets in line for a global financial center ranking and solidifying our position as the regional financial hub. Kenya's banking sector continues to expand locally and across the sub-Saharan African region with innovations driving financial inclusion. In 2016 FinAccess survey, Kenya's access to financial services improved to 75.3%, up from 66.7% in 2013. In 2015, Kenya was ranked position 1 in the world for leveraging technology to drive inclusion by Brookings Financial and Digital Inclusion Project. In this context, Mr. Speaker, I want to assure my fellow Kenyans that our financial sector remains strong and stable. The recent placing under receivership of 3 banks was due to specific factors related to these banks and not to the whole banking sector. Nevertheless, in order to prevent similar occurrences in the future, the following measures are being implemented. First, I will be presenting shortly to Parliament the Central Bank Bill, which has already been approved by Cabinet. Second, we are enhancing oversight of commercial banks' IT systems, while at the same time improving the skills of Central Bank supervisory staff on ICT and forensic audits. In addition, the Central Bank is in the process of recruiting skilled IT staff to strengthen its technical capacity. Third, we are also strengthening Central Bank supervisory functions in terms of numbers and competencies. Fourth, we are insisting on strengthening corporate governance practices in banks. Fifth, we are reviewing the quantum of penalties for regulatory violation. Sixth, CBK is also considering publication of its enforcement actions against institutions. Seventh, working with the relevant agencies to daily investigate and prosecute cases of financial fraud promptly. And eighth, we intend to strengthen the bank resolution process under the Banking Act as well as the Kenya Deposit Insurance Corporation Act. Mr. Speaker, the government continues to implement measures to address the high cost of credit and to expand access to credit in the economy. We have developed the Movable Property Security Rights Bill 2016, which provides for borrowing using movable assets as collateral for enforcement of security rights by lenders and protection of borrowers using such collateral. In addition, we are developing the electronic collateral registry where lenders will be able to lodge their security rights on specific collateral through an online platform. Mr. Speaker, this year I'll be putting a special focus on enabling the financial sector to play its role in enabling Kenyans access affordable housing. In this regard, on the demand side, I have gazetted a legal notice to provide a window for the National Social Security Fund to invest in prescribed financial vehicles for development of affordable housing. In addition, we are working with our development partners to put in place a mortgage liquidity facility which will provide long-term funding to financial institutions, including SACCOs, to enable them provide longer tenure mortgages to the public. We have also developed a raft of measures aimed at smoothening the land titling and collateralization process, including the ongoing digitalization of land registry. On the supply side, we shall operationalize incentives to facilitate developers of low-cost housing for them to provide infrastructure which would otherwise have been provided by the county or national government. Mr. Speaker, to cement progress made thus far, and in the spirit of consolidating Kenya's position as the financial hub in the region, I have already exposed to the public comments, for public comments, the Nairobi International Financial Center bill, which has already undergone extensive stakeholder consultation. The bill provides a framework to strengthen Kenya's position as a financial hub of choice in the region through incentives, addressing bottlenecks, and putting in place necessary market infrastructure and market development. I will also be tabling the Financial Services Authority bill, which provides for much more than a simple merger of the existing non-banking regulators by encompassing issues of market conduct, financial services, consumer protection, and addressing existing regulatory gaps, such as regulations of credit provision. Mr. Speaker, we are also moving to strengthen both the primary and secondary markets for government securities, which constitute a major component of our capital markets. This will include introducing electronic bond auction, which will spare investors from the current manual processes of submitting paper bids, separating the retail and wholesale component of the market, introducing primary dealers and market dealers, and establishing an efficient horizontal repo market. In addition, with volatility in interest rates having been tamed, we shall now proceed with the M-Akiba government bond, the world's first purely mobile phone-based government security. Mr. Speaker, the retirement benefit sector has continued to experience significant growth. The government is, however, concerned about the confusion, duplication, and an unhelpful competition that has characterized the retirement arrangement for workers under the county government since the enactment of the new constitution. There remains a compelling need for a framework that will ensure maximization of the benefit of pool staff pension assets, facilitate mobility of staff across county governments and between national and county governments, and bring on board universal norms and standards benchmarked with international best practice. This framework should cover all county governments, workers, including those initially seconded from the national government, those from the defunct local authorities, and those employed by the County Public Service Board and the County Assembly Service Boards. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, the National Treasury, as a ministry charged with the pension policy, will be working with all parties to rapidly put in place a comprehensive solutions once and for all. I urge all stakeholders, including the National Assembly, the Senate, the Council of Governors, to cooperate with us on this matter to allow for the best long-term and sustainable solution in the interest of the county workers. Further, Mr. Speaker, and in order to support the insurance industry in Kenya, Section 20 of the Insurance Act expressively prohibits placement of Kenya business with non-Kenyan or foreign insurance markets except under certain circumstances. Despite the existence of the law, imports into Kenya continue to be on cost insurance freight basis instead of cost and insurance basis. In effect, Mr. Speaker, this denies insurance companies registered in Kenya huge business that could substantially benefit the industry and the economy as well. To address this, Mr. Speaker, I'm directing the Kenya Revenue Authority to work with the relevant stakeholders to ensure that this part of the law is implemented. Mr. Speaker, this will also be beneficial to Kenya importers who, under the current practice, have limited recourse if anything happens to their imports before they arrive in the country. Mr. Speaker, let me now turn to infrastructural development and growth. Mr. Speaker, in order to achieve our objective of having in place world-class infrastructure, the government will continue with the ongoing public investments in road, rail, ports, energy, and water supplies in order to propel Kenya's economy towards prosperity. Much progress, Mr. Speaker, has been achieved in the implementation of the road rehabilitation and construction program, and a number of key projects in the road sector has been completed. We will also step up road transport safety and regulations that is aimed at developing and implementing road transport policies for an efficient, effective, safe, and decongested transport system. Mr. Speaker, some of the major ongoing projects include the Northern Corridor Transport Improvement Project, decongestion and improvement of the roads in cities and urban areas, rehabilitation of access roads, and the LAPSET project. The government will continue to enhance road network connectivity across the country with the aim of enhancing trade, commerce, agricultural productivity, and regional trade. To this effect, Mr. Speaker, the government has earmarked for construction 3,800 kilometers of low-volume seal roads across the length and breadth of the country to open up rural areas and farmlands. Mr. Speaker, to decongest the major urban areas, the government will continue with the expansion of the major roads. Currently, dualling of the Outer Ring Road in Nairobi is progressing well, and the dualling of Ngong Road to Adams Arcade has started and is expected to be completed in the next 2 years. Further, Mr. Speaker, the government, in partnership with the Nairobi City County, will be fast-tracking the realization of the Nairobi Metropolitan Mass Rapid Transport System and implementation of the Nairobi Metropolitan Transport Authority Bill. Mr. Speaker, the construction of the standard gauge rail SGR from Mombasa to Nairobi has progressed well and is now over 80% complete and is expected to be launched by June 2017 by His Excellency the President. Mr. Speaker, this rail will significantly reduce the cost of transport, facilitate faster and cheaper movement of freight and passengers, and enhance competitiveness of the economy, thereby positioning Kenya as a regional business hub. In this budget, Mr. Speaker, I have further allocated 154.4 billion Kenya shillings for the SGR, of which 118.2 billion is externally financed from China and 36.2 billion is GOK contribution. Regarding phase 2 of the SGR that will run from Nairobi to Naivasha, we have already concluded discussions on funding, and we expect construction to start in the financial year 2016-2017. Mr. Speaker, with the completion of the new rail, there will be developments of industrial parks along the SGR line at Dongokundu in Mombasa, Voi, Tito Andei, Nairobi, and Naivasha, which will help boost our manufacturing sector and its contribution to GDP and help create jobs for our youth. Mr. Speaker, the government has made good progress on reforms and modernization of the port of Mombasa, especially in expansion of container terminal. This, together with the ongoing integration of the single window system and other related systems will facilitate faster, efficient, and competitive clearance of cargo, positioning the port of Mombasa as the preferred hub in East and Central Africa. In air transport, Mr. Speaker, the screening yard and the security toll gates at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport has been completed, while rehabilitation work at the 5 airstrip, Nanyuki, Ikanga, Lodwar, Embu, and Malindi, and expansion and modernization of Isiolo and Kisumu airports are ongoing. Going forward, Mr. Speaker, we will scale up the ongoing airports expansion and modernization, commissioning the new Terminal 1E and commence work on the second runway at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, expected to be completed by the year 2018. We also plan to commence the expansion of the Eldoret International Airport to enable large cargo planes to land and position it as a transport hub. Mr. Speaker, to realize some of the interventions I have highlighted above, I have allocated, including external financing, a total of 117.6 billion and 30 billion for low volume seal roads. Of these, 23.8 billion will be through the normal ministerial roads budget, while 6.7 billion will be from the equalization fund, specifically for the marginalized areas. For the ports, Mr. Speaker, I have allocated 0.8 billion for ongoing upgrading of Malindi Airport, Isiolo Airport, Suneka Airstrip, and Lokichogyo Airport, and 0.5 billion for acquisition of 2 ferries for the Likoni Channel, 5.5 billion for the Mombasa Port Development Project financed by development partners, and 10 billion Kenya shilling for the LAPSET project. In order to boost the regional trade, Mr. Speaker, the government will prioritize the construction of the East Africa road network, which is the Voi, Mwatate, Ngundanyi, and Malindi, Mombasa, Lunga road sections. The construction of the Kisumu, Kakamega road under the Kenya Transport Sector Support Program, and the construction of the 600 kilometers South Sudan link road are currently ongoing. Mr. Speaker, our commitment to provide affordable and competitive electrical energy remains on course. Significant progress has been made towards generation of 5,000 megawatts of power. To date, 615 megawatts of power have been added to the national grid, and this has significantly reduced the cost of power. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to exploit the vast geothermal resources that Kenya is endowed by creating a conducive environment for investors to invest, including providing a competitive power purchase agreement, PPA, letters of support, and risk guarantees arrangement. Further, Mr. Speaker, we expect to produce 300 megawatts of power from the wind in the next 1 year with the ongoing works at Lake Turkana Wind Project. These resources are expected to increase our clean energy mix, cementing Kenya's position as world leader in renewable energy. The additional power supplies, Mr. Speaker, will significantly reduce the cost of doing business, spur growth of enterprise and industries, and accelerate the creation of jobs in the industrial and other sectors. Mr. Speaker, we are implementing a program to connect at least 70% of Kenyans' households to electricity by 2017, and subsequently reduce the connection cost and time by at least 60% in the medium term. Already, about 5 million households 14,950 public primary schools and 980 public facilities have been connected to electricity under this program. Mr. Speaker, to fund specific intervention in the energy sector, we have allocated 120.2 billion, of which 81.6 billion is from our development partners, and 38.5 billion is GOK in financial year 2016-2017. This will cater for geothermal development, power transmission, rural electrification program, last mile connectivity, national street lighting program, electrification of public facilities, exploration and distribution of oil and gas, installation of transformers in constituencies, connectivity subsidy, and LPG distribution and infrastructure program. Mr. Speaker, since 1996, Kenya has continued to attract private investment into the infrastructure sectors, including the sectors such as telecommunication, energy, transport, water, and sewerage. Mr. Speaker, available public sector resources are linked to finance competing and critical infrastructure needs. In this context, Mr. Speaker, the government has recognized the critical role that can be played by the private sector in mobilizing resources for infrastructure development and is using PPP arrangement to accelerate infrastructure development, including the development of the 500 kilometers of roads under the annuity approach, the ongoing development of geothermal power, the construction of Kenyatta University hostels, the planned development of a seaport in Kisumu, the expansion of the Mombasa-Nairobi-Malaba highway, and the construction of the second Nyali Bridge in Mombasa, among others. Specifically, on the road annuity program, we expect to commence the construction of the first batch of the roads with funding from the annuity fund, which currently has received over 9.5 billion Kenya shillings. Mr. Speaker, now let me turn to agricultural transformation for food security. Mr. Speaker, we have made significant progress in reducing our dependence on rain-fed agriculture. In order to realize our goals in this area, we shall continue investing in irrigated agriculture to build resilience in the economy and also improve our food security. We are pleased, Mr. Speaker, by the progress made in the implementation of the 10,000 acres pilot phase in Galana, Kalulu. Drawing from the lessons learned from this pilot phase, we shall roll out a program covering at least 100,000 acres in Galana, Kalulu, and other designated suitable schemes throughout the country under a viable business framework that involves the private sector. Mr. Speaker, to implement the ongoing programs under this sector, I have allocated 20.8 billion for the ongoing irrigation projects countrywide, including the Galana Kalulu irrigation projects intervention to transform agriculture from subsistence to productive commercial farming. Also, the funds will also fund Mwea irrigation project and the National Expanded Irrigation Program. Mr. Speaker, in order to improve yields and output for our farmers, I have set aside 4.9 billion for subsidized fertilizer and seeds. Further, Mr. Speaker, to enable the country maintain adequate food reserves, I have allocated 1.6 billion for strategic food reserves. I have also allocated a total of 8.4 billion for acquisition of the offshore patrol vessel for the fishery subsector, also for the modernization of the Kenya Meat Commission, the revival of the pyrethrum sector, livestock and crop insurance schemes, livestock value chain support, and mechanization of agriculture. I have also set aside 1 billion for crop diversification program in the Meru region for the Miraa farmers and 2.4 billion for coffee debt waiver and Starbucks. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, let me now go to the promotion of industrialization for export growth and employment. Mr. Speaker, the manufacturing sector is a key driver to economic growth, particularly in the agricultural sector, through growth of exports and job creation. For this reason, Mr. Speaker, the government is keen to establish industrial and technology parks to catalyze innovation and value addition. The government will also establish green industrial parks under the special economic zones along the SGR line from Mombasa to Western Kenya, including the shores of Lake Victoria and within the proximity of geothermal wells to provide cheaper and faster transport and logistics, access to near-free steam and water, cheaper geothermal power, and leverage other byproducts for industrial, livestock, and agricultural development. Mr. Speaker, as members are aware, Pan Paper Mills was sold under receivership. The new owners have promised to make the necessary investment to revive the company and revitalize the economy of its host community. We will monitor development very closely to ensure that undertakings provided by the new owner are indeed implemented. Mr. Speaker, so as to promote the development of industries and extractive sectors of the economy, we have allocated a total of 7.7 billion for the National Airborne Geophysical Survey, the Leda Industrial Park development, textile development, ease of doing business, modernization of Rivertex, and ongoing modernization and debt for the new KCC. Mr. Speaker, I now go to the empowering the youth. Mr. Speaker, the government is cognizant of the fact that unless we invest in the potential of the youth, we will not achieve a real demographic dividends in the future. Mr. Speaker, 2 years ago, we revamped the National Youth Service as a vehicle for recruiting our young men and women into national service. This program helped in inculcating the culture of patriotism, service, volunteerism, civic competence, and social cohesion, not only among the trainees, but also with other young people within their community. This program created a lot of hope to our youth by preparing them for job market and other income generating activities, while at the same time providing them with the opportunities to serve our country. Mr. Speaker, we shall continue supporting this program for the benefit of our youth who acquire artisanal skills, crafts, and technical training. The skills gained will enable the youth to contribute to our national economic development. In financial year 2016-2017, Mr. Speaker, to meet the commitments we have made to our youth through the NYS, I am allocating 21.1 billion towards gender and youth empowerment programs. In addition, to further address the issue of youth unemployment, we shall be implementing the Youth Empowerment Program funded by the World Bank. This program targets to increase access to youth-targeted employment programs and improve their employability. Mr. Speaker, last year I proposed to introduce a tax rebate scheme for employers who employ and train at least 10 fresh graduates for a period of 6 to 12 months. Mr. Speaker, I have now developed the regulations and I will be proposing to gazette them under the tax measures. This is to make our young graduates employable by preparing them for the job market and contribute to the nation building. Mr. Speaker, the government recognizes the role of small and micro enterprises as a source of employment. As noted in my statement last year, growth of this segment continues to be hindered by inadequate capital. In addition, limited market access, poor infrastructure, inadequate knowledge and skills, rapid changes in technology, and sometimes unfriendly laws and regulations continue to hamper the growth of SMEs in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, to address these challenges, we will continue, one, to entrench Buy Kenya, Build Kenya policy in all public procurement. We will also enforce the legislation on preference and reservations that requires at least 40% of local content in our public projects. We will also continue to increase the allocation to WEZO Fund and the Youth and Women Empowerment Fund by 1.6 billion in 2016-2017. We also continue supporting the small and medium enterprise to acquire small industrial plants for value addition of agricultural products currently produced under Juakali, and we will continue to support research and development to boost science, technology, and innovation. Mr. Speaker, some of the economic stimulus projects that were initiated a while ago remain incomplete. In order to complete these projects, I have allocated a total of 1.6 billion for upgrading of the national schools, purchase of computers, aquaculture development, and for phototype, fresh produce, and wholesale markets. I now turn to tourism, recovery, sports, culture, and arts. Mr. Speaker, cultural diversity, sports, and arts foster inclusion in addition to being central to our tourism strategy. The tourism sector is well on its way to recovery, owing largely to the improvement in security, which has resulted in the withdrawal of travel advisories by key tourist source countries. The government will continue focusing on improving security in the country, as well as strengthening visa experience, packaging tourism sector incentives, and revamping the tourism communication strategy in order to ensure the sector recovers fully. To this end, we have allocated 4.5 billion for tourism promotion activities, in addition to some tax incentives that I will be announcing shortly. Mr. Speaker, the government has established the anti-doping agency and initiated the process of improving sports facilities in Eldoret, Mombasa, Kisumu, and Nairobi in order to strengthen our sports and arts. Further, Mr. Speaker, we have acquired and preserved 63,878 heritage collections for posterity, restored 19 sites and monuments, acquired 34,409 public records for preservation, and digitized 1.9 million public records and archives. Going forward, Mr. Speaker, the government, in partnership with key stakeholders, will continue to promote and develop tourism, sports, conserve national heritage, and enhance integration, cohesion, and patriotism, and promote vibrant art culture. To develop, preserve, and protect our culture and national heritage, I have proposed to allocate 1.9 billion for sports, culture, and arts program. In the area of film and music, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that Kenya reclaims its position as a leading destination, the government, in consultation with the relevant stakeholders, will roll out the required incentive packages. Mr. Speaker, to further enhance access and transformation of the education system through e-teaching and e-learning, we have set aside a total of 13.4 billion for the digital literacy program, commonly known as School Laptop Project, to schools, development of digital contents, building capacity of teachers, and rolling out computer laboratories for primary schools throughout the country. Mr. Speaker, as we speak, the laptop idea has already become a reality for 11,500 pupils across the country. We sampled some of the reactions after the initial rollout of the laptops to our schools. And a 10-year-old boy by the name Maina from Roysambu Primary School said, "I can't wait to learn new things and play educative games on the laptops." Further, his head teacher, Ms. Sarah Nyota, added, "It's not only the pupils who are enthusiastic at Roysambu, parents are giving it their full support and backing, and are donating laptops to help expand the pool of computers. So all 1,700 students get to use them. Some parents even helped build the storage facility and charging units for the laptop. The world out there is moving fast, and we cannot, as a country, afford to remain behind in terms of technology. Mr. Speaker, a standard 6 pupil in Kakamega Primary School, Belinda Moja, was overjoyed with her new acquisition and said, and I quote, "I have never used a laptop, but I am sure after being taught I will master it fast. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, the impact, the excitement, and the expectation are clearly self-evident. We shall ensure the remaining schools get their laptops in the financial year 2016-2017. To further support the ongoing programs within the education sector, Mr. Speaker, I have made the following allocations: 32.4 billion for free day secondary school education, 14.7 billion for free primary education, 14.5 billion for recruitment and promotion of teachers, 2.8 billion for the second phase of the teachers' house allowance, 2.5 billion for technical training institutes, 400 million for sanitary towels for girls in schools, 2.6 billion for school feeding program, 3.2 billion for subsidy to Kenya National Examination Council for examination fee waiver, 9.1 billion for higher education loans board, and 57.8 billion for university education. Mr. Speaker, let me now turn to equity, poverty reduction, social protection for vulnerable groups. Mr. Speaker, the government support for social safety nets program has grown significantly over the years, and we will continue to set aside resources for affirmative action intervention. Further, Mr. Speaker, we have set aside a single registry for the National Safety Net program in order to improve transparency, accountability, and reduce costs. Going forward, we will empower persons with disabilities for self-reliance through training and decentralize the single registry for the National Safety Net program to counties. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, in order to address the blight of the less disadvantaged in the society, combat poverty, and promote equity, the social protection safety net in form of cash transfers has been enhanced as follows: 34.5 billion Kenya shillings for the National Government Constituency Development Fund, the CDF, 2.1 billion for affirmative action for social development, 6 billion for equalization fund, 7.9 billion for orphans and vulnerable children, OVC, 7.3 billion for elderly persons, 1.5 billion for those with disabilities, 0.4 billion for street families rehabilitation, 400 million for children welfare society, and 400 million for presidential secondary school bursary scheme. Further, Mr. Speaker, I have set aside 6 billion for the final phase of resettling the IDPs and for the restorative justice. Mr. Speaker, I now move to the quality and the accessibility of healthcare services for all Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, the government recognizes that investment in quality healthcare services is essential in developing a healthy population with higher productivity for sustainable economic growth. In partnership with the specialized state-of-art healthcare equipment through leasing, these include modern theater equipment, surgical and sterilization equipment, laboratory equipment, kidney dialysis equipment, ICU facilities, digital X-ray machines, and ultrasound and imaging equipment. In addition, Mr. Speaker, our policy objective of preventive healthcare program aim at eradicating infant and maternal mortality has achieved significant progress. The free maternal service has been a success, with the number of deaths of children under the age of 5 declining from 100,000 in 2013 to 70,000 currently, while mortality for mothers giving birth has declined from 6,000 in 2013 to 4,300 currently. One healthcare worker in a public hospital noted, overall, I can say that free maternity service is doing a good job. For example, we used to have so many mothers crowded in the maternity ward because they were waiting to clear the bills. But nowadays, they deliver and go home depending on the mode of delivery. If normal delivery, they stay in the facility for 24 hours. If cesarean section, we discharge them on the third post-operative day. So we never have mothers who are crowded in the department like we used to do. This has eased the pressure on the healthcare workers. Again, Mr. Speaker, Dr. Kimu noted before the program, many mothers would be detained at health facilities because they were unable to raise the maternity fee being charged at a public institution. But this has now changed. These are some of the glowing tributes to the free maternity program. In financial year 2016-2017 budget, to further support the program, I have allocated 4.3 billion for free maternity health care, to further support the managed equipment services and scale up the supply of specialized medical equipment to hospital. I have allocated 4.5 billion for lease of medical equipment. Other allocations that I have proposed in this sector include 8.8 billion for Kenyatta National Hospital, 5.8 billion for Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, 1.7 billion for Kenya Medical Research Institute, 3 billion for doctors, clinics, officers, nurses internship program, 600 million for the National Aid Control Council, 0.9 billion for free primary health care, 700 million for slum clinic upgrading program, 500 million for health insurance subsidy program under elderly and disabled, 1.3 billion for rollout of universal health coverage, and 3.5 billion for Kenya Medical Training College, KMTC. Mr. Speaker, access to clean and affordable water is indispensable for eliminating the burden of diseases. For this reason, the government will continue to invest in clean water supply and put in place measures to control floods and harvest rainwater, as well as protect and conserve the environment, thus connecting over 1 million additional Kenyans to safe drinking water. In order to mitigate the impact of the climate change, Mr. Speaker, the government will continue to mainstream climate change measures into its projects and programs. We shall therefore enhance our tree planting and reforestation, water harvesting, smart agriculture, technologies that reduce pollution level, investment in green energy, construction of mini dams, water ponds, and rehabilitation of existing dams and water ponds. Mr. Speaker, the Constitution of Kenya and Vision 2030, and in line with the sustained development goals, premises universal access of safe water and sanitation for all by 2030. It is with this in mind that the Embassy of Sweden came up with the innovative financing, Embassy of Netherlands came up with the Kenya Innovative Financing Facility for water that will enable a Kenya pooled water fund to facilitate financing of the water sector infrastructure by using longer term bonds in the local capital market. This will lend to credit-worthy water service providers to build water and sanitation infrastructure. This program will leverage the existing Ministry of Water and Irrigation budgets by raising a minimum of 3 billion in infrastructure bonds on an annual basis. As you are aware, Mr. Speaker, Kenya will go into elections in August 2017. The government is committed to a free and fair general election. Towards this end, we have allocated to Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC, 19.7 billion for them to adequately prepare and conduct the general election. We have also allocated to Parliamentary Service Commission and the Judiciary 28.4 billion and 15.8 billion respectively. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to strengthening devolution for enhanced service delivery. Mr. Speaker, since 2013-2014, the national government has supported devolution as stipulated in the Constitution and the PFM Act 2012. As evidence of this commitment, Mr. Speaker, significant financial resources have been channeled to counties to determine and finance their own priority programs in line with the National Development Agenda. Mr. Speaker, over the last 3 financial years since devolution was introduced, the national government has allocated more than 710 billion to the counties. Majority of this allocation, some 676 billion, was transferred in the form of counties' equitable share of nationally raised revenue. During the just ended 3-year transition period, annual aggregate fiscal allocation to counties, that is, including additional and conditional allocation, increased from 195 billion in 2013-2014 to 288 billion in 2015-2016, representing a growth of more than 42%. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that since July 2013, when devolution took root, we have disbursed every single penny due to counties in every financial year. Indeed, as at today, Mr. Speaker, we have disbursed all equitable share funds for the 11 months to May in this current financial year, 2015-2016. We are now preparing to disburse the last batch of the month of June. Mr. Speaker, in the financial year 2016-2017, Parliament has approved allocation to county government amounting to 280.3 billion as the equitable share of revenue raised nationally. This allocation guarantees county government of 20.5 billion increase over and above the equitable share allocation in financial year 2015-2016. Furthermore, this allocation is more than double the constitutional minimum of 15% of the latest audited revenue. Mr. Speaker, we have also provided additional conditional allocation to county government amounting to 23.9 billion that include conditional grants for level 5 hospitals of 4 billion, special purpose grants of 200 million to support emergency medical services in 2 counties, Lamu and Tana River, which are vulnerable to terrorist attack. Grant for free maternal health care of 4.1 billion, 900 million conditional grants to compensate county government for foregone user fee, which was abolished, 4.5 billion for financing the leasing of medical equipment, 4.3 billion for road maintenance fuel levy fund, and 605 million for construction of county headquarters in 5 counties, and 5.3 billion conditional grants, loans and grants from the World Bank and the government of Denmark. Mr. Speaker, this brings the total allocation to county governments to 3 or 4.2 billion, which is equivalent to 33% of the most recently audited revenue approved by the National Assembly. Cumulatively, Mr. Speaker, at the end of 2016-2017, the amounts transferred to county government since the rollout of devolved system of government in Kenya will be in excess of 1 trillion Kenya shillings, a remarkable support to service delivery and a clear demonstration of the government's commitment to ensure that devolution succeeds. Mr. Speaker, since the establishment of the county government in 2013, we have continued to receive complaints from citizens and businesses, enterprises on the haphazard manner in which user fee, service charge, and property rates are being levied at the county level without participation by key stakeholders or public consultation. We have witnessed a number of counties introducing multiple regulations, forcing business to pay for numerous licenses and permits, especially between jurisdictions. Such regulatory practices are clearly contributing to unfriendly business environment, which has adverse implications for investment, employment, and economic growth. Mr. Speaker, at the same time, certain county revenue instruments such as cess may be in violation of the Constitution, while others such as single business permit may have a weak basis under the current legal environment. To this end, Mr. Speaker, the National Treasury, jointly with all the relevant state agencies, as well as the Council of Governors, has commenced a process to develop a national policy and legal framework to guide county governments' revenue-raising measures, particularly on own sources of revenue. This exercise is specifically intended to promote a conducive business environment and ensure compliance with Article 209 of 5 of the Constitution, as well as better coordination and well-defined mechanism for regulating business activity countrywide. The exercise is also intended to support efforts by the county government to enhance their own sources of revenue, reduce tax gap, and improve the alignment between county budgets and policy priorities. Mr. Speaker, allow me to emphasize that all organs of government ought to abide by the resolution of the 5th National and County Government Coordinating Summit held in Sagana in February 2016. This summit adopted a policy of austerity aimed at eliminating wastage so as to release more resources from recurrent expenditure to development expenditure. Mr. Speaker, I'll now turn to Equalization Fund. Mr. Speaker, I have allocated 6 billion from the Equalization Fund to be disbursed among 14 counties as recommended in the policy on marginalized areas. Mr. Speaker, we expect the Equalization Fund allocation for 2016-2017 as well as the previous allocations currently being held in the Equalization Fund account at the Central Bank of Kenya amounting to 6.4 billion will be fully disbursed in the budget year 2016-2017 following Parliament's approval of the fund's guideline and the fund's official launch by His Excellency the President on March 11, 2016. Mr. Speaker, the Equalization Fund allocation for financial year 2016-2017 represents approximately 0.6% of the last audited revenues approved by the National Assembly, which exceeds the constitutional prescribed minimum of 0.5%. The allocation from the fund will be used to finance identified projects in 14 marginalized counties. The resources will be appropriated and channeled through the relevant ministries. Mr. Speaker, before I move to the revenue measures to finance the planned expenditures, let me note that we are in the final stages of getting parliamentary approval for the estimates of expenditure submitted to this House in April 28, 2016 for us to prepare the appropriation bill. We will be providing comments to the report of the Budget and Appropriation Committee on the estimate shortly. Mr. Speaker, allow me now to first provide an overview of the implementation of the 2015-2016 budget. During the course of the year, we witnessed revenue shortfall in the financial year 2015-2016 and increased expenditure requirement to cater for security, among others. Arising from the revenue shortfall in 2015-2016, we instituted various measures aimed at aligning the expenditures with a revised resource envelope. These include measures to curb non-priority expenditures and to free resources for more productive purposes, as well as expenditure cuts on slow and delayed projects. Mr. Speaker, these measures were rationalized through a supplementary budget that we tabled in Parliament recently. Mr. Speaker, we estimate revenue collection, including appropriation in aid, of about 1.3 trillion by the end of this month. Of this, ordinary revenue is projected at 1.184 trillion Kenya shillings. Mr. Speaker, overall expenditure and net lending are projected at 1.842 trillion by the end of this year. We expect a fiscal deficit, excluding spending related to standard gauge rail, of 398.1 billion or 6.1% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, allow me now to turn to the financial projections for financial year 2016-2017. Mr. Speaker, first, the budget policy framework for 2016-2017 and the medium term is in line with the commitment that we made 3 years ago and aims at striking a balance between supporting rapid and inclusive economic growth and continued fiscal discipline. The government will continue to reduce the overall fiscal deficit and put emphasis on efficiency and effectiveness of public spending and improve revenue performance. Specifically, the fiscal policy aims at raising revenue efforts to above 21% of GDP over the medium term and containing growth of total expenditure. Mr. Speaker, for financial year 2016-2017, the budget targets revenue collections, including appropriation in aid, of 1.5 trillion Kenya shillings. Of this, ordinary revenue is projected at 1.37 trillion Kenya shillings, or 18.6% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, this year we have witnessed revenue shortfall, and arising out of this, Kenya Revenue Authority has instituted various measures to seal revenue leakages in custom administration, particularly by use of Certificate of Conformity (COC), while valuing imported goods for payment of duty. Other measures include expansion of withholding VAT agents for suppliers to county government, expansion of targeting nil and non-filers, rental income program, and operationalization of the tax appeal tribunal. Further, a reputable consulting firm has been engaged to deep dive into KRA business processes and systems to identify any gaps and weaknesses and propose requisite adjustments needed to ensure the 2016-2017 revenue targets are met. These, together with other measures I will be proposing shortly, will provide a stronger basis for achieving the set revenue targets. Mr. Speaker, overall expenditure and net lending are projected at 2.26 trillion Kenya shillings, or 30.6% of GDP. The expenditures reflect support to ongoing infrastructure projects in roads, standard gauge rail, ports, energy, security, among others. Part of these development budgets will be funded by project loans and grants from development partners, while the balance will be financed from domestic sources. I wish at this stage to thank all development partners for the commitment and support for our development agenda. Mr. Speaker, in line with the Constitution and the PFM Act 2012, a contingency provision of 5 billion has been provided for in financial year 2016-2017 budget to cater for unforeseen expenditures. Further, Mr. Speaker, as indicated earlier, the Equalization Fund has been allocated 6 billion to cater for critical development expenditure in water, roads, health, and energy in marginalized areas to improve services in those areas to the standards in other areas. This, together with the accumulated deposits of 6.4, brings the total available resources in Equalization Fund to 12.4 billion Kenya shillings. The National Treasury has proposed utilization of these funds and as per the recommendations of the Commission on Revenue Allocation. Mr. Speaker, the expenditure create a financing gap of 691.5 billion. But excluding the standard gauge rail, SGR, which is fully funded by China, the deficit is 603.2 billion. The overall gap will be financed by net domestic borrowing of 225.3 billion, or 3% of GDP, 462 billion net external borrowing from concessional loans from development partners, and other domestic financing of 4 billion Kenya shillings. Going forward, Mr. Speaker, we remain committed to bringing the fiscal deficit down gradually to below 4% of GDP in the medium term. This reduction should strengthen our debt sustainability position. In this context, Mr. Speaker, allow me to assure this Honorable House that Kenya's public debt remains sustainable. We have been careful to maintain our external and domestic debt well within our capacity to service the same. the recent debt sustainability analysis conducted jointly by the government, the IMF, and the World Bank concluded that Kenya continues to face low risk of debt distress, with the net present value of our public debt to GDP below 50%. As our debt is primarily focused on the development of infrastructure, it is significantly beneficial to Kenyans. I now turn to the tax measures and miscellaneous amendments. Mr. Speaker, the rest of my statement outlines various tax measures and miscellaneous amendments that I intend to introduce through the Finance Bill 2016 and the regulations. Mr. Speaker, the tax measures and miscellaneous amendments I intend to propose hereunder are broadly categorized into 6 priority areas, which complement the broad policies I have outlined in an earlier part of my statement. These include, first, promoting growth of industries and employment creation, facilitating infrastructure development, enhancing equity and fairness in the tax system and tax administration. Fourth, cushioning household budgets to ease the cost of living. Fifth, strengthening financial sector stability. And sixth, promoting private sector growth. I'll start with promoting growth of industries and employment creation. Mr. Speaker, our iron and steel mills are closing down due to unfair competition from cheaper imported iron and steel products. In order to protect and create more jobs for our youth in the iron and steel sector, I have introduced a specific duty rate of $200 per metric tons on a wide range of iron and steel products which are available in the region to cushion our local manufacturers from unfair competition. Mr. Speaker, plates and sheets of aluminium alloys are the major raw materials used in the manufacture of aluminium cans. These raw materials are now available in the region. In order to attract investment in the can manufacturing sector, I have remitted the import duty on aluminium plates and sheets to allow manufacturers of aluminium cans in the country to import the inputs under the duty remission schemes at a rate of 0% instead of 25%. In addition, I have increased the rate of import duty on aluminium cans from 10% to 25% to protect local manufacturers of the cans. Mr. Speaker, the World Health Organization requires manufacturers of pharmaceuticals products to install specialized air conditioning equipment commonly known as heating, ventilation, and air conditioners in order to comply with the good manufacturing practices. In this regard, I have exempted the HVAC air conditioners from payment of duty in order to make them affordable to the manufacturers of pharmaceutical products. Mr. Speaker, the Export Processing Zone scheme has continued to play a significant role in the growth of our economy. However, its role has been curtailed by trade restrictions and duty-free imports from COMESA region. In order to enhance the role of the scheme in growing our economy and creating employment, I have stayed the application of import duty and proposed to exempt from VAT made-up garments and leather footwear procured from the Export Processing Zone to enable Kenyans to acquire new clothes and shoes at affordable prices. Mr. Speaker, while animal feeds are exempt from VAT, some of the raw materials used in their manufacture are taxable. This treatment has led to high prices of animal feeds. In order to make animal feeds affordable to farmers and attract more manufacturers to invest in the sector, I propose to exempt raw materials used in the manufacture of animal feeds from payment of VAT. Mr. Speaker, last year I introduced a tax incentive for employers who engage in apprenticeship. I propose to gazette the regulations that will facilitate employers in the implementation of these incentives. Employers who engage in at least 10 graduates will be allowed an extra 50% cost of the apprentice emolument in addition to the normal allowable emoluments. Employers are therefore requested to take up this opportunity and empower the graduates leaving our universities. Mr. Speaker, the removal of excise duty on kerosene in 2011 was intended to cushion the low-income earners against high prices of this petroleum product. However, the removal of the tax has since resulted in increased adulteration of fuel in the country. This has denied the oil marketers business in the neighboring countries, in addition to giving them a bad reputation. In addition, adulteration negatively impacts car engines and increases their maintenance costs. In order to discourage these harmful practices, I propose to introduce excise duty on kerosene at 2 or 5 per 1,000 litre. Mr. Speaker, tourism is one of the leading sectors in the foreign exchange earning in Kenya. However, in the recent past, the sector has been adversely affected by the negative travel advisories, consequently reducing the number of tourism visiting Kenya. In order to boost the sector and encourage local tourism, I propose to exempt entry fee charged into the national parks from payment of VAT. 2, exempt commissions earned by tour operators from VAT. Thirdly, I propose to increase the air passenger service charge for external travel from $40 to $50, and for internal travel from 500 Kenya shillings to 600 Kenya shillings. The revenue raised from the increase will be used exclusively for the promotion of tourism. In this regard, the National Treasury and the Ministry of Tourism will develop a special tourism promotion fund for this purpose. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the facilitating infrastructure development. Mr. Speaker, with the growing population of youthful entrepreneurs, the demand for decent, low-cost housing is steadily growing, particularly in the urban areas. Currently, demand for housing is estimated at about 200,000 units annually, with only 50,000 new units constructed every year, thereby occasioning a shortage of 150,000 units annually. To bridge this gap and also to ensure decent, low-cost housing, I have introduced an incentive to encourage investors to enter into these sectors by reducing the corporate rate of tax from 30% to 20% for developers who construct at least 1,000 units per year. Mr. Speaker, transport is a key. Mr. Speaker, transport is a key service to all sectors of the economy. With the increasing expansion of our road network, there is a corresponding increase in the cost of maintaining our roads. Mr. Speaker, in order to maintain the expanded road network, I propose to increase the road maintenance levy from 12 shillings to 18 shillings per litre. In the meantime, the transition period for the imposition of the VAT on petroleum products, which was to expire in September this year, has been extended by a further 1 year. I now turn, Mr. Speaker, to enhancing equity and fairness in the tax system and tax administration. Mr. Speaker, last year I introduced excise duty on motor vehicles based on the age of vehicles at a specific rate. This has been perceived to be unfair, inequitable, and punitive to importers of vehicles commonly imported by low-income earners, but beneficial to importers of luxury vehicles. In order to address the situation, I propose to amend the Excise Duty Act 2015 to remove specific rate of duty and introduce ad valorem rate of 20% based on the value of the vehicle. Mr. Speaker, cosmetics and beauty products are not currently subject to excise duty. These products are subject to excise duty in some countries and in the East African community. In order to help to move towards the harmonization of the excise duty regime in the EAC, I propose to introduce excise duty on cosmetics and beauty products at the rate of 10%. I also expect that other excise duties take effect beginning July 2016 as provided for by the law. Mr. Speaker, last year I introduced measures meant to enhance compliance among landlords by enacting a simplified...
Order members, order. The CS will be heard in silence, even if you are excited. Proceed.
Mr. Speaker, last year I introduced measures meant to enhance compliance among landlords by enacting a simplified taxation regime based on 10% of gross rent for taxpayers earning less than 10 million shillings per year. I propose to gazette rules to facilitate in the implementation of this law, introduce a minimum taxable rent income of 12,000 per month, and empower the Commissioner to appoint withholding tax agent for rental taxation. These measures are meant to encourage landlords to do a full and true declaration of their rental income. Mr. Speaker, the government is committed to providing an environment that enhances the investment climate and tax compliance. The government is aware that there are taxpayers who own assets and businesses outside the country and would be willing to reinvest back home, provided that there is a conducive environment to facilitate such reinvestment. Consequently, I propose to declare tax amnesty for such taxpayers, provided that they submit their returns and accounts for the year of income 2016 between January 2017 and December 2017. Mr. Speaker, taxpayers who take up this amnesty shall have all their principal taxes, interest, and penalties for the year of income 2016 and the prior years automatically remitted in total. In addition, the government shall not follow up on the sources of such income and assets declared. Mr. Speaker, Kenya Revenue Authority has been working towards simplifying and reducing the time taken to file tax return by taxpayers, and also enable the authority to flag out the non-compliant taxpayers to ensure that every person pays his fair share of taxes. In order to make it easier for taxpayers to submit their tax return and in the iTax system, I propose to amend the Tax Procedure Act to grant Kenya Revenue Authorities powers to collect information in advance from identified persons for purposes of pre-populating the information in the iTax system. Mr. Speaker, Kenya continues to face increasing threats from terrorism, drug trafficking, and related cross-border minimal activities. The country also faces the challenge of increased inflow of contraband goods, a practice which undermines genuine trade besides leading to loss of government revenue. In order to strengthen controls on the import supply chain, I propose to introduce later in the year legislations that will streamline the training, licensing, and regulation of Kenya clearing agents pending agreement at EAC level of harmonized approach on the issue. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the cushioning household budgets to ease the cost of living. Mr. Speaker, in order to encourage the use of energy-efficient stoves that support conservation of our environment, I have reduced the import duty on stoves from 25% to 10%. The duty reduction will also align the energy-efficient stoves with similar stoves and cookers that use gases, electricity, and other fuels that attract import duty at 10%. Mr. Speaker, The use of wood and charcoal by many Kenyans exposes them to premature death, as well as denying them access to clean, safe, and efficient household energy. I propose to amend the VAT Act in order to exempt liquefied petroleum gas from payment of VAT. This will give Kenyans access to clean, safe, and efficient household energy and protect forest cover and reduce premature death. Mr. Speaker, tea and sugarcane farmers in the agricultural sector have been experiencing declines in income due to many factors, including an ad valorem levy on tea and the sugar development levy. In order to improve the earnings of the farmers, I propose to remove these levies. The institutions that were hitherto funded from these levies will now be funded from the exchequer. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I also intend to remove all other levies, including levies charged by the National Environmental Management Authority and the National Construction Authority in order to reduce the cost of doing business. Mr. Speaker, our economy grew by 5.6% in 2015 and is expected to rise to 6% this year. On the other hand, the world economy grew by 3.1%, while the sub-Saharan economies grew by 3.4%. This good news allows us to share the good performance of the economy as widely as possible. Consequently, I propose to exempt from tax bonuses, overtime, and retirement benefits paid to workers who fall under the lowest income tax band. In addition, I propose to expand the tax bands and increase personal reliefs by 10%. These measures are meant to cushion the workers from the high cost of living and demonstrate our commitment to sharing the growth of our economy. Mr. Speaker, the government appreciates that it has received numerous income tax proposals from various stakeholders which are meant to facilitate the taxation reform agenda. In connection with this, some of these proposals will be considered when reviewing the Income Tax Act, Cap 470, which is currently ongoing. I intend to table the bill in this House shortly in the next financial year. Mr. Speaker, let me now turn to strengthening financial sector stability. Mr. Speaker, as I did mention earlier, we shall be introducing 3 landmark financial sector legislation, namely the Financial Services Authority Bill, the Nairobi International Financial Center Bill, and the Movable Property Security Rights Bill. In addition to these major reforms, I am proposing a number of other changes in order to facilitate growth and stability of the sector. In banking, Mr. Speaker, last year I did table in this House specific measures to increase the capitalization of banks in order to ensure we have a strong and stable banking system, but our efforts were not successful. Mr. Speaker, I am seeking to reintroduce the proposal, and I am hopefully that members will look at them more favorably in light of the recent developments in our banking sector. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the current monetary penalty for violation of the Banking Act or the prudential guidelines is capped at 5 million Kenya shillings. This amount has proved to be too little compared to the seriousness of some of the violation institutions have committed. I am therefore proposing to increase the maximum penalty to 20 million Kenya shillings and to allow for additional penalties for each day that the violation continues. Mr. Speaker, the Credit Information Sharing Framework in Kenya has continued to develop and increase its coverage as a result of facilitative reforms that we have put in place over the years. Indeed, the expansion of the CIC framework was one of the key factors behind the improvement of the Kenya's ranking in the World Bank ease of doing business indicators this year. Apart from the obvious benefit from the borrowers who maintain good credit history and to lenders who are able to get information on potential borrowers, the CIS regime is important to the economy as a whole in terms of increasing access to credit, reducing transaction costs, enhancing efficiency in the financial intermediation, and fostering financial sector stability through reduction in non-performing loans. To maximize on this benefit, I am today proposing additional amendment to the Banking Act as well as the SACCO Societies Act to facilitate cross-border information sharing and to allow SACCOs and utility companies to more effectively participate in the CIS framework. Mr. Speaker, with the increasing number of SACCOs invariably using the name SACCOs and SACCO Society, it has become difficult to know the difference between a cooperative society, a SACCO society, a deposit-taking SACCO society, and a non-deposit-taking SACCO society. The emergence and exponential growth of Matatu or PSV SACCOs have further fueled the confusion. Therefore, I propose to amend the SACCO Society Act to provide that only SACCOs that are licensed for deposit-taking can use the acronym Deposit-Taking SACCO Society, DTS, or deposit-taking SACCOs, to differentiate them from the other SACCOs, and also to provide legal restrictions for the usage of these acronyms by other non-deposit-taking SACCOs. Mr. Speaker, Kenya has witnessed growing interest in online trading of foreign currency, particularly among the youth. There is currently no regulatory framework to guide online forex trading in Kenya, where it is estimated that over 50,000 investors are participating through foreign registered brokers who link through the internet to access the highly liquid currency clearing centers in the US, Europe, Japan, and other countries. Providing a legal framework for the online trading of forex currency goes hand in hand with making Nairobi an international financial hub. In this regard, I am proposing facilitative amendments to the Capital Market Authority Act, following which I will be gazetting relevant regulations for effective and secure online forex trading by Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, last year I did remove the requirement for annual licensing of banks and instead empowered the Central Bank of Kenya to issue non-renewable perpetual licenses. This year, I propose to extend similar perpetual licensing framework to institutions licensed by the Retirement Benefit Authority. In addition, I propose to further review the investment guidelines for retirement benefit schemes to facilitate their investments in new products approved by the Capital Markets Authority, including exchange-traded derivatives and listed real estate investment trusts. Mr. Speaker, medical expenses constitute one of the biggest categories of the expenditures for our senior citizens. Many workers who have employer-provided medical schemes during their working life find themselves without any cover the day they retire. An innovative solution to this challenge is for retirement schemes to establish separate medical funds into which members can contribute during their working life and the same be used to cover at retirement. I am legislative amendments to the retirement benefit occupational and individual regulations to allow schemes to put in place such arrangement. Mr. Speaker, last year I did amend the Insurance Act to facilitate the industry to move to risk-based solvency framework and a more principle-based investment framework. To further anchor this risk-based approach, I am proposing additional amendments, in particular expanding the allowable forms of capital and reflecting the new gross premium valuation methodology across different classes of business. In addition, to protect insurance policy holders from long delays in settlement of their claims, I am proposing to reduce the time in which a claim should be settled from 90 days to 30 days. With the rapid growth of interest we have experienced in Sharia compliant or takaful insurance product, I am proposing amendments to anchor this form of insurance in the Insurance Act and also facilitate the issuance of regulations to govern takaful insurance. Mr. Speaker, let me now turn to promoting private sector growth. Mr. Speaker, the enactment of the new constitution has seen the government devolve various functions to the county government. In view of this, the county governments are expected to contract for the provision of services. Like the national government, the county governments are faced with financial constraints to undertake projects within their jurisdiction. The national government enacted the Public Procurement Partnership Act to allow participation of private sector in the implementation of projects, and especially that require huge funds. However, the provision in the Act do not recognize the county governments as a procuring entity for the public-private partnership project. In order to affirm the government's commitment and support for devolution, I propose to amend the Public-Private Partnership Act to recognize the county governments as an independent procuring entity for the public-private partnership project. Mr. Speaker, the mandate of the Competition Authority is to conduct market inquiries. The authority experiences challenges when seeking information from stakeholders who sometimes withhold vital information on grounds that it is not mandatory for them to provide the information. In order to enable the authority to realize its mandate as envisioned by the law, I propose to amend the Competition Act to make it obligatory for stakeholders to provide information to the authority when requested to do so. Mr. Speaker, the Competition Authority further experiences challenges in imposing financial penalties after the company engages in restrictive trade practices. The authority uses a 10% maximum of the gross annual turnover based on the international best practice in calculating of penalties. In order to create certainty in the determination of the penalty, I propose to amend the Competition Act to specify the financial penalty to be a maximum of 10% of the gross annual turnover, which is in line with the international best practice and also with the regional competition agencies. Mr. Speaker, in addition, the authority receives various applications for mergers which have no effect on the competition on restrictive trade practices. I propose to amend the Competition Act to set a threshold in order to exclude mergers whose effect has no great impact on the competition on restrictive trade practices from the provision of the Act. This will also reduce the administrative burden on the authority and facilitate investment. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, 3 years ago, we set ourselves a goal of implementing an economic transformation agenda, one that was to strengthen our economy, deliver prosperity to Kenyans, and propel Kenya into a middle income status level in line with the aspirations of Vision 2030. Mr. Speaker, this dream was realized when Kenya was classified as lower middle income economy with gross national income per capita of $1,245. Mr. Speaker, despite this notable progress, we are still not satisfied because we believe we can do more to uplift the livelihoods of all Kenyans and bring the country to upper middle income status. So as I conclude, Mr. Speaker, allow me to express my gratitude to my fellow cabinet secretaries and their principal secretaries for their support and contributions throughout this budget process. I am sincerely grateful to His Excellency the President and His Excellency the Deputy President for their unwavering leadership and guidance and support during the budget process, and in particular during the budget retreat held in Naivasha in April 2016, which involved all cabinet secretaries and principal secretaries. I'm also sincerely grateful to the speakers of the National Assembly and Senate and their respective clerks for overseeing the approvals of submissions on the budget estimates for financial year 2016 and 2017. Also members of the Liaison Committee, the Budget and Appropriation Committee of this House, and other departmental committees of Parliament for their comprehensive and constructive engagement in reviewing the budget estimates for the financial year 2016-2017. Sincerely also grateful to Majority Leader of the National Assembly, Honorable Aden Duale, for his relentless support to get most of the legislative proposals on finance matters passed through the House. I also want to thank all members of the National Assembly and Senate for their cooperation and support. I also want to thank the management and staff of the National Treasury under the able leadership of the Principal Secretary, Dr. Kamau Tuge, who have tirelessly worked long hours, including most weekends, to ensure that these budgets and supporting documents meet the legal deadline. I also want to thank the management and staff of Kenya Revenue Authorities and the Central Bank of Kenya for their contribution. Also the staff from the Attorney General's office for the legal drafting of the very many bills. I also want to thank the staff of the Parliamentary Budget Office for providing support on budget process, and our bilateral and multilateral development partners, as well as private foundations for their contribution to our development agenda through their technical and financial support. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I thank all Kenyans from all walks of life for their contributions, proposals, and suggestions received during the finalization of this budget. I thank you, and God bless you, and God bless Kenya. Thank you very
Honorable Kajuju, member for Meru. You can't be excited more because of the 1 billion inclusion. Honorable members, I wish to thank the Cabinet Secretary for having made the public pronouncement of the budget highlights and revenue-raising measures for the national government for the financial year 2016-2017 and the medium term. I also wish to confirm that in conformity with the provisions of Standing Order number 24, Clause 2, the Cabinet Secretary has since submitted to my office the proposed Finance Bill 2016 and other legislative proposals necessary to actualize the revenue-raising measures he has pronounced for national government for the financial year in question. Honorable members, it is now my pleasure to invite all honorable members, the Cabinet Secretary from the National Treasury, other Cabinet Secretaries, and all guests to a reception at the Parliament forecourt hereafter. And honorable members, time being 52 minutes past 5 o'clock, and there being no other business, the House now stands adjourned until Thursday, 9th of June 2016 at 2:30 p.m.
And that was quite a lengthy speech made by Cabinet Secretary for the Treasury, Henry Rotich, speaking about how he intends to spend the money, which we more or less knew because his estimates were out, and now speaking about how he intends to raise the revenues to cover the budget.